guys welcome. Feel free to stand up if you like. God, we're so happy to be in this place this morning. We just turn our hearts towards you. And we ask that you come and meet us here, God. Thank you that you have cherished every heart. You have rescued every heart in this room. And we just ask that you would continue to speak to us. Give us inspiration to do what you have made us to do, God. We want to shine your light. As the Spirit was moving over the water, Spirit come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. As the Spirit was moving over the water, Spirit come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Come. Spirit is moving my heart down. When you fill the room, you're here and I know you're moving. I'm here and I know you feel me. Let's make that our prayer this morning. Let's sing that first verse again. And as the Spirit was moving over the water, Spirit come move over us. Come rest on us. As the Spirit was moving over the water, Spirit come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Come. Spirit is moving my heart down. Waiting for the room. You're here and I know you're moving. I'm here and I know you're moving. Come down. Spirit is moving my heart down. Waiting for the room. You're here and I know you're moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Yes, oh, fire and rain, come and do it again. Open up the gates and heaven on it. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Fire and rain, come and do it again. Open up the gates and heaven on it. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Spirit, we can give my heart. Wait for the room. You're here and I know you. I'm moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Holy Spirit, come. And Holy Spirit, come rest on us. You're all we want. You're all we want. Holy Spirit, come rest on us. You're all we want. You're all we want. Spirit, make me my heart. Wait till the room. You're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Come, Spirit, make me my heart. Wait till the room. You're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. God, we just thank you for your presence here this morning. We ask a special blessing over our children today and all those that have come to be with them and shepherd them. We just ask that they would receive something new this morning in their story and their time together from each other. And we just ask that you would make the time so sweet and that we would get to hear about it later. Children, you can go outside. Awesome worshiping. And we also ask God that you would just bless Micah's heart this morning for coming and being here to speak and teach what he's learning. We just thank you for all that's going to bring us. We ask that every single heart here would be touched by something that comes out of Micah's mouth this morning. So, amen. Amen. Come on over.
A short service today, maybe. We'll see. Make sure my surface doesn't fall. We're a graceful church here, right? All right, good morning, everybody. How are you guys doing? Good. This awesome place, pretty cool church we got here, huh?
Yeah.
What's that? I like our classes too.
Yeah. I like how you're matching your wife and your son.
Yes. I used to teach at GMBC down the road over there. I used to teach Sunday school all the time, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and I also taught at a college group. Jacob did that. I haven't done that in like 3 years or so, so it's great to come back and be able to sit in front of people and talk again and get used to that. And like I said, you guys are a very graceful church, so it's nice to be able to have you guys to do it with and get back in the rhythm of things. And, Danny doesn't teach much up here, so we're kind of learning. We're kind of in this together, so we appreciate your guys' patience with us and everything. And, I'm super excited. I was planning another message this week. God's ways are better than ours. I had a crazy work week this week. I was up till 3 a.m. one morning working on a work project. So I had this awesome thing planned of this just in-depth theological study. And it just kind of I wasn't ready. And I felt like God was saying, this is not the week to teach that. So I had to take kind of a turn, and I decided, on my heart to share some of my testimony and to tie in some passages with that as well. And, starting off, anybody else grow up, probably like me, as in the church, always a believer? A show of hands, who's always been a believer, right? Oh, that's a lot of people at work. That's awesome. Actually, I want to kind of hear, this is not really related to my sermon, but it's fun to know. I want to know what some of your first memories are.
Donuts.
I always love what's that?
Powdered donuts.
Powdered donuts in your first memory?
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
That's the only reason I went. Memory versus memorizing them.
Seriously? Getting Sorbies, those little candies. I don't know. For getting our first round.
Okay, nice. Awana or something like that.
It was just part of the church. Yeah, we just memorized verses.
Choir practice. Choir practice. Yeah, you guys are putting me to shame over here. I have no church memories at the beginning.
Imagine, or acting out the
nativity
scenes.
Yeah.
Of his Jesus one time for Easter.
Yeah, so some of my first memories were actually right on the island here, on a house on the other side over there by the base. I was kind of like Coco probably too. It's we were born and raised on this island here, very privileged, pretty awesome. So we were there. I have my first few memories. One of my favorite first memories is I was always kind of musical, I guess. I found a tape recorder, and with the cassettes back in the day. They can't even use those nowadays, can they?
Yes, you can.
And I remember this is my first memories, putting a tape recorder in one of those, whatever you call those things. And I figured out how to record myself. So I would push record, and I would scream at the top of my lungs, and then stop it, rewind it, and play it back. So he'd just keep me screaming. And my dad came over and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just recording on this thing here. I figured this out." I was like, "Oh, that's pretty impressive." I didn't have to record a thing on there at a young age. So my first memories of my parents were always faithful. I had my brother Danny and David. So you guys know Danny. Here, David. He's probably watching. He'll come here eventually. And then eventually, little brother Gabe came along. We decided our house wasn't big enough, so we moved right down the street. Actually, where Danny and Claire living right now on B Avenue. So we moved over there, and I was raised in a very, very awesome Christian household. My father did mission work all the time, so he was always going to Mexico or going to other countries and doing mission work there. Before I was even born, they lived in Israel for a few years with Danny and David, kibbutz and ministering to Jewish people over there, spreading the gospel to the Jews. And then they moved back here and had me. I think I'm like my mom's favorite, and I think it's because I always like their excuse to come back to Coronado, where she grew up as well, versus a hot Israel with no air conditioning. And every single day before school, my mom would read about it to us. We were all sitting there, and she would, before we had breakfast, before school, and she would open the Bible. And I mean, we probably heard the Bible like 4 or 5 times throughout our life, just growing up. And I didn't probably like remember any of the stories that were being told, but it was this solid foundation of like, this is a very important book. Like this is really a big deal. And yeah, so I was super blessed with that. And at school, I was, I was a pretty privileged kid. I was really good at math at a young age, and I was also very good at piano at a young age. And they found out I could I was like my cousins and Danny were trying to figure out how to play furlys on the piano. And my cousin Sarah was taking lessons, and I just walked up and I figured it out. And I played it, and they were like, okay, he's really good at piano. Let's get him a keyboard for Christmas, And that's always kind of stuck with me, and same with math. It's always been like a stronghold in my life of like being very good at math, and I'm an engineer now, so that makes sense. And so that was me going to school. I was really good at that stuff. In 3rd grade, we were going to Calvary Chapel. Actually, that building we were meeting at. I actually went to that church. Our family went there. They were meeting at the kindergarten before, and then eventually we swapped over to the Presbyterian church, GMPC, right down the road. And I was always looking forward to Sunday school, always looking forward to Vacation Bible School. Just solid, comfortable, awesome Christian life, When middle school came around, we went to Christian camp. How many of you guys have experienced Christian camp? Oh, yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious, because you came to faith again recently, right?
I did.
And back in the day, you probably went to those Christian camps.
I did. I became a born-again Christian when I was about 13.
Yeah.
By the campfire.
Uh-huh.
And it was a beautiful experience.
Yes.
And I just got a little bit lost for many years.
Yeah.
Until I came back again.
Yep. That's very cool. Yeah, they say, what's the stereotypical thing about camp is you kind of get a camp high. Yeah, you get a camp high, and then you come back, and it just kind of like mellows out, right? So I did have, and I think, it is kind of a stigma. It's kind of like a thing people say about camp, but I think God actually uses that a lot of the time. Like you said, it's a very beautiful thing. And same with me. I was up there at Forestall, and one night we were having a worship night, and they do like plan these things too. It's like they plan out the week, and they plan this almost emotional high point to where they try to get you to accept the Lord, which you can have arguments against that kind of stuff, but it's effective, and it stuck with me. So one night I was sitting in the auditorium outside. It's gorgeous. It's up by Lake Arrowhead, like halfway up the mountain. And I'm sitting there in the auditorium, and I remember just looking up during night service and seeing the stars and seeing like telephone poles or like wires. And I just remember that clear image, and I just kind of it was one more step in my life of just like, okay, I think God is there. God is real. Remember Jamie Nelson? You guys know Jamie Nelson. Yeah. I know, this is great. Jimmy Street.
Yeah, you're
Jamie,
a home right here.
we go way back. We've gone
Central.
several paths for a long time to come back. But this guy, Jamie, he just turned to me that night and was like, God's good, isn't he? And I'm like, yeah, okay. God's good. Yeah, I think you're right.
That voice.
And it's kind of weird for people who grew up in the church. You think you have to kind of have that salvation moment, And if I had to pinpoint something, I guess I would pin it on that. I don't think, and through this you'll see, I don't think it's always necessary to have A, B, C. This is exactly when I gave my life to Christ, and that was it. It's kind of like Pippa, right? You made that commitment, and then other stuff happened, and then now you're here. So it's not always an A, B, C simple thing. But what did happen, they made it very simple for us middle schoolers. Kind of said, your life is like you're flying a plane, and it's just take the wheel, Jesus is there, and he's asking, can I become the pilot of your life? And I decided in that moment, like, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to step down, and I'm going to let Jesus take it and fly my life. It's, again, a stupid cliche thing, but it's funny how Jesus says, like, you should come to me as children, because that's like, it's a very childish, easy thing to understand, but at the same time, it's pretty profound, and I think it's extremely effective as well. And from that moment, I've seen that God has indeed, like, flown my life. So we get back down, and I equate this to, again, with like the salvation moment. You have people like Paul, who, if you guys know the history of Paul, he was a Jew of Jews. He was persecuting Christians. He was going around trying to kill Christians after Jesus died. And he had a point where literally Jesus came to him, and it was just this amazing moment where he just opened his eyes. Well, actually, he made him blind, so the opposite, but made him blind, and then opened his eyes to the truth, and then he became a clear-cut Christian. And then I kind of relate more to Peter's kind of walk. And does anybody know how Peter, like Simon Peter, he called the rock of the church, right? And his first step was what? Does anybody know? Like, what was the first moment that you could say is like his almost salvation moment? I guess.
When he said that you're the Messiah or something?
No, that's a good one. Yep, that's a big one. Dropped his net. That's pretty big. Yeah, Coco, you're wrong.
The name change, different moment.
But I mean, who knows? It's like at that point, I don't know what God was doing in his life, but Jesus came by and he said, "You guys are fishing. Drop your nets. I'm going to make you fishers of men." And he dropped his nets and he walked with Jesus. Again, if you have to pick a point, it's like that might be it. But it gets a little more complex than that, doesn't it? We know that Peter's the guy that ended up betraying Jesus. Well, not Judas betrayed him, but he forsake him, right? They asked him, "Do you know Jesus?" And he denied him 3 times. They'll go over that more later. But it's more complex than, A, B, C kind of thing. So again, I let God take the pilot seat. I started playing piano in youth group more. Jacob, that's my times. Big band. And this is kind of the weird thing, and I got kind of lucky. In a traditional church, it's not super traditional, but the old people at GMBC, when you have someone playing acoustic guitar and drums and piano, the person they're going to kind of push up higher is the piano player. They're like, he's playing the traditional, real instrument piano. So my whole life, I've been kind of I've received a lot of praise from people. For playing piano, for my red hair, believe it or not, a lot of attention for
good and bad
hair. Yes. And then as well as being good at math. Those are kind of some big strongholds. Some big strong points of my life that I can grasp and say this is kind of who I was. Milo. Poor Milo doesn't have red hair.
No, he's doing just fine.
So and while I had that camp high, I stuck with it too. Some of my other friends, they kind of fell away at some points, and they little by little fall in different paths. They always, they probably still call themselves Christians today, but they just took different, they made different decisions than I did. There was one point when my friend, that's my kiddo. There's one point in early high school where my friends were, they were all smoking. I've never smoked. I'm just the clean cut kid. Okay, so I was always I am gonna do everything right. And so they were smoking around me, and they look at me, and I'm just sitting there, and they're like, this isn't fun when you're here. Smoking's usually fun, and when you're here, it's not really that much. It's not that much fun. I'm like, it shouldn't be fun. But that's kind of I stuck with it, and the Fisher family, we were a pretty solid beacon of faithfulness on this island. My parents and us as kids. But God did put that to the test big time when I was in high school. I'm not going to go into it too much, but again, our family kind of tore apart in a huge, dramatic fashion. But in that time, I believe God was still watching over me. I think it was only a few weeks before a monumentous event. I actually came to my father and I asked him if he could do Bible study with us, because I knew he just knew loads about the Bible, more than any of us kids. and he has so much wisdom to share. And so I asked him, could you sit down and do a Bible study with us every week? And he did, and the first thing he taught us was facing joy in all trials. So like no matter what you go through, always count it as joy, always count it as a blessing. And then like 3 weeks later, this like half-decade giant trial just kind of smashed into our lives. And again, thank God I was continuing to be faithful. I continued to walk in that path. I stayed the course. I gave Jesus the pilot seat, and he was still going. And I started. I was still following him full on, playing piano a lot, and I hit this moment in my life. And my first kind of eye-opening moment was at Forest Home, in that seat, looking up and realizing God is there. Something's there. I need to make a connection with this thing and give Jesus my life. And I had almost a second moment, kind of like Peter's moment with Jesus, where he says, "I don't know." And believe it or not, so I was in college. I was studying engineering, and again, I was getting better and better at music. And I loved the reaction out of people when I told them. First off, I'm an engineer. I'm studying to be an engineer. That just feels really good to tell people you're an engineer. You kind of get a glimmer in their eye, And they always want to play piano for people. And again, get that glimmer of like, wow, he's really good at that. So I was back at Forest Home, it's a Christian camp, and one of my dreams was to become a worship leader there, or to become a dean. And they were so highly looked up to. They were so just like, they were always the funniest, coolest people around, And I wanted so bad to be one of them. And so that week, I spent the whole week trying to connect with these like higher up people. I actually spent the whole week like I didn't even care about the kids. Almost like I was supposed to be like counseling. I cared more about being a good light to these people. And it was kind of unbelievable. There was a point where we were having lunch with some of the heads of the camp, and I just completely shut down. I think I sat there for like a couple hours. I didn't say one word to anybody, and I was just like something was happening in my soul. I was like, what is going on? And I was getting really angry because I'm like, this is my one shot to get this thing that I really want, and I'm totally blowing it. And then I went to the worship leader one day, and I was like, hey, we should, I would love to play music with you. I would love to come and maybe go to the auditorium at break time. We get like 5 hours of break to do whatever you want. I said, I would love to go there and play music with you. So he said, yeah, sure thing, at like 2 p.m. So I went there, and I sat down in the same spot, actually, that I sat with. I first looked into the sky and kind of acknowledged God's existence there. I sat in that same spot, and 2 p.m. came around, and he didn't show up. And another half hour or so, and he didn't show up. And I sat there for like an hour and a half with no one else around, just kind of sitting there. And I started to think, and I think God kind of nailed me on this. And I started thinking, what am I doing? Like, why am I asking to play music with this guy right now? And I realized the only reason I'm asking this guy to come play music with me is so he can see how good I am, and that I will be accepted, and I'll have this status in his mind, and he'll go, and I'll just be puffed up, I'll just be this awesome, I want to come here, do this job. And it was kind of an unbelievable moment when I realized, everything was kind of torn down. It's like, have I just been living a lie my whole life? Of like, everything I do, whether it's engineering or piano or even being faithful to God, I'm like, these things are being put into question now. It's like, am I doing this just for myself? And I think, again, I equate to Peter at this moment, where it's like, he's walking through Christianity, and all of a sudden, he just absolutely blows it. And and it was kind of unbelievable that this eye-opening moment for me was in the exact same seat that I had the other eye-opening moment. So, at this point, I kind of had a couple of choices to go down. At that point, you can kind of spiral down into the depths of despair and just beat yourself up. But I still believe, God was in that pilot seat, and He did this for a reason, and He kind of opened my eyes to this so that I can just get back on track, and it really gave me a deeper understanding of what it meant to be a follower of Christ. It's given me this deeper understanding of what the gospel really is, and almost sets the stage, like the stage that was set for Jesus when He came to earth. I kind of relate to the Pharisees almost in a way. So when Jesus was preaching the Sermon on the Mount, okay, this is God on earth. All the Old Testament is leading up to this moment of Jesus coming to earth. And does anybody know the first thing He says in the Sermon on the Mount? It's the very first thing Jesus says. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's kind of a weird opening, isn't it? It's like, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He didn't say, believe in me and you'll be saved. He didn't say, follow these steps or do these things and you'll be saved. He said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. As you read through Jesus' interactions with people in the New Testament, I think you see this pattern. And I love finding patterns. It's the same with the sermon I gave 2 weeks ago, the pattern of, if you read the New Testament, if you read through the epistles that we have in the church, you're going to get a lot of instruction on how to love. And I think the same thing as you read through Jesus' interactions with people, you see that you can kind of tell who the poor in spirit are, and you can tell the ones who are kind of living for selfish gain. So that moment when I realized that I was living so selfishly, and it was not really a fun moment. It was kind of embarrassing, it was humbling, it was devastating, and I would almost equate it to being poor in spirit. I believe it was a very necessary step for me to take that next step in my faith, is to become poor in spirit. And again, I believe that Peter had the same experience with Jesus. I mean, before this, they were arguing over and over again about who would be the greatest in the kingdom. And then, at that point, he becomes extremely humbled, poor in spirit. And the reason why this is so important, I think of the Pharisees, they think it's acting a certain way, and this is how you'll be saved. And that's why Jesus threw everything backwards. And I actually listened to Pastor David's sermon this morning at GMC. It was perfect. He said, God, He came. Well, I totally forgot what he said actually. The big thing is those who have no need. He did not come for those who did not need a physician, but He came for those who are sick. He came not to call the righteous, but the sinners. And again, the Jews at this point were puffing themselves up as, we don't need this. And on the Sermon on the Mount, again, he even goes in, he dives in deeper on this, and he says, if you really want to be saved, you have to be even more perfect than the Pharisees, which are the top echelons of the religion. They're like, well, what the heck are you talking about? You can't do that. But I believe they really forgot what the true message was. In Micah 6:8, and I like this verse because it's my name. Micah 6:8, He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. And I think Jesus paves this way very clearly for us. The way to salvation is always humbling ourselves in selfless faith to God. And again, the Jews just completely missed this. And I love looking at the illustration of, gospel illustrations are always fun to pull up. There's so many good, in the Bible there's so many great gospel illustrations. I think one of the greatest gospel illustrations is just sacrifices in general. And so you have the Jews, and they have this temple where they have to have a sacrifice before they go into the Holy of Holies. But it wasn't just the Jews, it's like you go to any indigenous culture, and they had this ingrained in them that they needed to have a sacrifice to something. And it was always paving the way for Jesus here. That we are not enough. We need someone to take our sins onto them. So the Jews, at the time of his arrival, they were trying to obtain righteousness with God through the law, through their own righteousness. And I'm not going to say I wasn't saved at that point, but it was a very clear-cut change in scope and a deeper understanding of what the gospel really is. Is that, I'm doing all these things, I'm walking the path, which is in no right or wrong thing, but just sometimes you got to really check your motivation. And I think that's where a lot of these Jews and Pharisees were off. And Daniel will go into this next week more with the rich young ruler. Really stoked for that sermon. But they kept missing it. And you'll notice the people who didn't miss it were the people who were poor in spirit. And again, I had this comfortable, cushy life, and I was somewhat missing it. And these Jews, comfortable, cushy lives, missed it. The prostitutes, the tax collectors, not very comfortable. They knew they were not of high status, and that's who Jesus went to, that's who got it. And I think one of the clearest examples of this is the thief on the cross. I think this is unbelievable. I'm going to read this section here on this in Luke. 2 others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him, with Jesus on the cross. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." And they cast lots to divide his garments. And people stood by watching, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself. If he is the Christ of God, his chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "The King of the Jews." One of the criminals, so this is the important part here, one of the criminals who was hanging with him railed at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and save us." In other passages, it actually says that both of the criminals were doing this. They were both at the same time screaming at Jesus, "If you're really the Christ, save us. What are you doing?" But the other, at some point in that interaction, he rebuked him and said, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation, and we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds, but this man does nothing wrong." And he said to Jesus, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." You can try to dissect this theologically, a lot if you want to. I think it's pretty, there's some pretty basic things that we can get out of this. I see a man who went from self-righteousness to becoming poor in spirit, understanding that his condemnation is justified, receiving the due reward for his deeds. He humbled himself. He absolutely humbled himself. And he asked Jesus, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." Now you can go into that and say, is that like his altar call moment or something? It's like, I don't know, but all I know is he said, we deserve to be here. This guy doesn't. And Jesus, when you go in your kingdom, remember me. And the outcome, he said, "Truly, you will be with me in paradise." And I like to compare the thief on the cross with Pharisees, okay? This is like the top people again. And again, this is another big picture thing you'll find through all the Gospels. This is something Jesus pounds on over and over and over again, that the kingdom of heaven belongs to the poor in spirit. Now, don't get the wrong idea that, the other thief on the cross was also, poor in spirit. Okay? He's kind of saying this is, and we're not quite poor here, and Jesus talks about that, where he's like, the rich, will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. He's pretty much saying, I think he's digging deeper at this understanding of who we are, and he's trying to, I think, knock our pride a little bit. So, I think of a homeless man I was once feeding downtown. Again, one of these things I was doing as a Christian, don't not go feed homeless people worrying that you're working for your salvation. Do the things, but just understand the foundation of it all. But I was talking to a homeless man down there, and he had his wife and his 2 kids. They're probably under 5 years old. And we're like, you can get, there's help for you. There is help. There's plenty of programs, especially for you with a couple kids. We can get you help immediately. And he said, "No, I'm going to do it myself. Just flat out. I'm not going to get any help. And I think, when I was in that situation, sitting there at Forest Home, waiting for this guy to come, realizing that the only reason I'm doing this is for my own puffed up conceitness, I had the decision to react with either one of those thieves on the cross, One of them, dove even deeper, and he threw reviling, and he just didn't understand what was going on. He could be like this homeless man who says, I don't want any help. No, don't want it. Or you could be like the other thief on the cross, who accepted redemption. You guys know what the word redemption means? This pops up in the Bible all the time. It's a big, fat Christian Bible word, redemption. And it actually it's derived from the ancient slave trade. So when you had all these slaves, if you wanted to redeem them, you would pay for them to be free, pay off all their debts. That is what redemption means. And that is what Christ is offering to us. He wants us to understand, again, poor in the spirit, they're the ones who inherit heaven. Why? Because the Pharisees, they're not really in the slave trade. They don't think they're in the slave trade. They really are, but they don't think so. When you're a thief on the cross, you don't really get much lower than that. And so he accepted that redemption. He accepted that payment from Jesus to come out of the slave trade and become part of his family. Jesus provides a way out. And again, as I was sitting there, I could have stewed, I could have gone home and just been absolutely depressed. But Jesus provides a way out, and his burden is very light. It's like another cliche, the good news. You can't have the good news without the bad news. And I think that's a big thing Jesus came here to do, is to kind of give us the bad news. But it's really not. It's good news. He's taking on these burdens for us, and he's providing salvation. And maybe it is as simple, and sometimes you just got to reevaluate and say, am I truly letting Jesus, take the front seat of my life? Am I really letting him do it? As the band comes back up again, I want you to ask yourself, are you truly poor in spirit? Maybe you need to put some things into perspective. Maybe you need some things that need humbling. Even in your Christian walks, maybe there's some selfishness there, that you're doing this for your own gain. And I would just challenge you to respond like the people on the cross. Respond like so many of these stories you read about Jesus talking with these decrepit, poor spirit people. And it really is as simple as just letting Jesus take the wheel. Life is a plane. If you see yourself veering off, just let him right back in. So let's just stew on that a little bit.
I love hearing that personal testimony. It just changes our perspective, even though it's Micah's story. I love how you related it to all the stories that we can relate. So, let's just have a time to sing together. I felt led to sing Amazing Grace, and I feel like you guys might feel a little bit of that. So, just sing together. You guys feel free to stand or sit. Whatever you feel brings you closer to the heart of God. Once you focus.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Mountains are still being moved, strongholds still being bruised. God, we believe, yes, we can see it. Wonders are still much to do.
encourage you guys, if you need prayer for anything, we got some prayer warriors in this room. We're going to call out Cecily, who's sitting in the back, and maybe Jed, would you pray over some people? It's okay. It's totally calling these people out. If you need prayer, go talk to somebody about it. Don't leave this place without getting that, because it's going to change your day, your week, your life. And that's what this time and space is for. If you need prayer for a heart miracle, if you need prayer for a body, physical miracle, we want to pray that with you. We want to see change. We want to see God move here. So, if you feel led to pray for someone, awesome. It's not weird, and they probably need it. So, I just encourage you guys to follow that leading if you have that. We're going to sing a couple more songs. Also, if you guys want to stand up to dance, whatever. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, bending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 That is who you My God, that is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are. Let's hear our voices. That is who you are. And that is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are.
That is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are. God, hear every prayer this morning. Who you are. Who you are. That is who you are. I love to hear you guys sing it, and I know Jesus does too. I'll never be more loved than I am right now. Wasn't holding you up, so there's nothing I can do to let you down. It doesn't take a trophy to make you proud. And I'll never be more loved than I am right now. You are God, you are God. Jireh, you are enough, and I will be content in every circumstance. Jireh, you are enough. Going through a storm, but I won't back down. I hear your voice carried in the rhythm of the wind to call me out. You would cross an ocean, so I wouldn't drown. There's never been closer than I am right now. You are Jireh, you are enough. Oh, you are God, you are Jireh, you are enough. And we will be content in every circumstance, 'cause you are Jireh, you are enough. Forever enough, always enough, you are more than enough. Yes, God. Forever enough, always enough, you are more than enough. Forever enough, always enough, you are more than enough. Forever enough, always enough, you are more than enough. I don't want to forget how I feel right now. On the mountaintop, I can see it so clear what it's all about. Stay by my side when the sun goes down. Don't want to forget how I feel right now. You are enough. You are enough. Jireh, you are enough. And I will be content in every circumstance. You are Jireh, you are enough. Forever enough, always enough, you are more than enough. Make that your prayer this morning. Forever enough, always enough, you are more than enough. I don't want to forget how I feel right now. God, you just feel your spirit here moving in this place this morning. We just don't want to forget what you've accomplished here. Pray that you'd send us forth, God, with a mission. Pray that you land a mission on everybody's hearts today. How can we serve you? How can we be a light to the world? How can we show other people the love that you've given us when we're at our poorest moments? Just how can we thank you for our poorest moments? By just turning towards you in them. Thank you for your saving grace. Amen, you guys. Go forth and do well.
I'm going to share some with you guys really quick.
Yeah.
Thinking about this, something until I fit in, right? So, fun fact that I'm sure everyone will want to know.
book of Psalms, right, written by King David, we recognize that they're often said in a song. And in Hebrew, the word is tehillim, which is the same word for prayer, right? So prayer and song, same word, tehillim, or tefillah. Tefillah is all essentially the same word. The other kind of fun thing is that same word is also used to mean properly adjudicating yourself and your position to God, which is under Him. So when you're worshiping rightly and you're praying rightly, which is essentially the same thing, it involves properly judging yourself in reference to Him and in reverence to Him. So, just free prayer life.
I got one more thing. Thursday, we're doing arts and crafts night, so we're going to be here at 6 o'clock Thursday. And if you have your own arts and crafts stuff, bring it. If you don't, I got extra stuff I'll be bringing for people, so it'll be fun. We're just going to get together and do our thing.
Are you an artist?
No, I'm just going to be doodling.
Oh!
That's a good segue because I totally forgot to do announcements. I was caught up in the moment. Jen, do you have an announcement? Oh, you were waiting. You'll be at the art thing? Is that what you're waiting? Oh. Tonight is Concert in the Park. It's the second to last one. Our church will be at 7th and Orange Corner. So if you're at the park, come find us. We've got tons of pizza. If you like pizza, if you like something else, bring your own picnic and join us. And it'll be really fun. There's only 2 left. And tomorrow is Wine, Women, and Whatever at Miss Jen's beautiful house. And so if you are a woman and you're not on the email list and you want to get connected, please talk to me, talk to Jen, talk to Pippa, talk to Cecily, and they can get your contact info to me so that I can make sure you're in the loop. Does anyone else have an announcement I'm forgetting? Okay, good.
Jesus loves you.
Jesus loves you. That's the most important announcement. You guys have a great week. It's so good to see you. We'll see you next week. Or Thursday.